Alright, here we are in the fifth and last video of Module 1 on the Ultimate ZBrush Guide course. Now, the previous videos have been more about conceptual stuff and getting the ideas and the basis and the core principles of ZBrush right, and general overviews of the user interface and that sort of thing. But this video is a little bit more practical. We're going to learn how to easily navigate in ZBrush and get comfortable with the navigation and all that, so that we can move forward and actually create something. So let's go ahead and jump straight into it. I'm going to switch to the camera off so that we can see all of the interface. And also this video is gonna serve as an example of how we're gonna work from this point onwards in terms of loading UIs and concentrating on specific tools, so that we can learn as much as we can in this in the following modules. So after you open up ZBrush, you might have something that looks like this. You might have a different project depending on your original settings, but for the most part, this is what you're gonna end up doing. Now, before you do anything else, let's go ahead and click on the Preference tab. And let's go ahead and load the navigation UI, which is a specific user interface that I created for this video. So click on Load UI. All right, so let's go ahead and select the navigation M01, which is module 01, and L, which stands for lesson 05. And let's load that up. And you can find this in the download section or the download resources for this specific video. So selecting that, I'm going to click Open. All right, so here we are. This is a pretty simple UI and it's all about navigation. So we're focusing on navigation. Some of these elements are actually part of the standard UI. So all of these, you might find them like around this side. This one will be around here, and this one will be distributed around here in the standard UI. All I did was just repositioning these elements and added some new ones like these ones here. I'll get to that in a second. And simplified everything so that we only focus on things that have to do with navigation. So the whole idea of this methodology is to focusing on certain elements at a time without any distraction. So you will understand what each one of these elements do and how they can help you in your process. And once you know and understand the processes and the actions that these buttons and switches will trigger, then you can arrange them in the way that you want it. You can take, I don't know, some elements like these, put them at the bottom, this one move them to the left, and so on and so forth, or simply just get rid of them and use the shortcuts, for example. But basically that's the idea, and as I mentioned, this video is also kind of like an introduction of how we're going to work from this point onwards in terms of learning the software. All right, so I divided this in 3 parts, roughly. So this one have to do with the navigation of the 3D object or the 3D space that we have already sort of like gone through some of the basics here. This section has to do with the 2D or document navigation, and this area right here, the first one, is kind of like divided into 2 parts as well. This one has to do with the editing of the 3D object. Okay, the main difference between this navigation 3D and editing 3D object is that the navigation 3D has to do with the camera or the view, right? Whereas this actually has to do with the editing of the placement of the object in the space in the X, Y, and Z coordinates. So X, Y, and Z coordinates, right? So that's what these sort of elements are in here. And again, I mentioned that this one is split into 2 parts. This is just the lightbox. I'll get to this in a second and how we're going to use it. The store camera and these 2 arrows. So I just added these elements here to fill in this space, and because I think storing cameras is something really, really useful that I don't see a lot of people doing. But if you're following a concept, for example, it's always really good to use references and view it in specific angles that match the reference. So I'm going to show you how to do that, and that is also part of the navigation. All right, so with that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into the practical stuff. All right, so the first thing I want you to do after loading this UI, no matter what you have in your canvas, is load this project anyway. So I'm going to click on the lightbox. So again, this is the file managing system in ZBrush, and we're going to use a default project from ZBrush to learn navigation, or to basically navigate around it and get really comfortable using the navigation in ZBrush. So let's go ahead and start with the dog, which is a pretty good example that allows us to see, you know, where the dog is facing and see the side views and all that. So I'm going to double click on this. By the way, if you want to navigate around these lightbooks, in case that you have multiple projects in here, you can just click anywhere and drag. In this case, there's no many on the right hand side, but you can click and drag the same way that we navigate the palettes in ZBrush, like I showed you before. So let's go ahead and select the dog and double click it to load it. So as soon as you double click it, in my case, I already had another project in here. So ZBrush is asking me if I want to change or save anything that I have in my current sphere. I'm just going to go and select no. And there we go. So now we have our project loaded and we can concentrate on the navigation. The next thing that I want you to do before you touch any of this or try to move around is to change the color of the background. And that's going to allow you to see exactly the size of the document, which is pretty important, especially when we get to rendering and all those sort of things. But it's good to know where you can change that color. So if you go to the document palette, right, you'll see that this document palette has here at the 1, 2, 3, and number 4, section number 4, you have this back swatch. And this essentially changes the color of the background. Now, we don't want to select a specific color. We just want to select something that is a little bit lighter or darker. So we can choose a color or a saturation of color from the UI. So I'm just going to click on the back, hold it, and then I can move around. And you'll see it just changes to a different gray because I'm selecting other elements of the UI. Or you can go for a dark color if you select the outline of this piece. So I'm just going over the UI and selecting a different color. So I'm going to select a dark gray like this one right here and let go. And that should be enough. Okay, so it's pretty subtle, but at least that gives me an idea of the document size. So probably you see a little gap in here. So that means that this is the actual document and this is kind of like empty space, that little line. We're going to get to that. So that's all I wanted to do. So load the dog and then change the color of the background by just clicking and dragging and selecting a different color. All right, so now we can go ahead and reposition our document. So we can use this section here that has the scroll, the zoom, the actual, and sorry, the AA half and the actual. So the actual, if we click it once, is going to show us the actual size of the document. So the total resolution of this document. And you might see, let's go ahead and select a white color. You might see that some lines or some edges around the model itself, they look, if we were to zoom in this section, you will see that it looks sort of like this, kind of like a jagged edge like this, and that is because of the resolution of the document. So it's probably hard to see, but it's pretty evident here, as well as these areas, as well as this area right there. And this is something that has to do with the resolution, like I mentioned, but it's only a preview stuff. So I'm gonna delete this. And that is what I wanted to show you in terms of this AA half. So AA half stands for anti-aliased half. So I'm gonna click on that. And you'll see that the document goes to half the size, right? So now my document is this big. So this is kind of like the window into that 3D space, right? None of that is useful. These areas right here, right? So this is the size of our document. But if you pay attention to the border, it's much more smoother. So it's much, much better. So this is something that we can use, for example, if you want to take a work in progress, a screenshot of this, you want to probably go into AA half and take a screenshot of that. If you want to have a larger version, so something that fills the entire screen, but also has the anti-alias, like we just did with the AA half, you probably have to increase the document to double the size, right? And then do AA half. All right, so I'm going to clear out that, and let's go ahead and go back to the actual size of the document. All right, so now we can go ahead and start using the navigation of the button. So the scroll and the zoom, there again, basically they have to do with the document. So you can just move away a little bit if you want to have more resolution, or you can scroll and pan the document. I rarely use these buttons, to be honest. I generally speaking work as actual size, right? And that's about it. If I want to check the sharpness of the edge, I go AA half, and that's it. But I don't have the scroll or the zoom in my custom UI because I rarely change the zooming or the panning of the document. right? I just want to leave them here in case that you want to use them, and so that you remember or that you know what they're doing. So the way that I sort of like to think about these ones is the scroll deals with the x-axis and the y-axis, right, of a 2D space. And the zoom one, it doesn't have to do with the C depth or anything like that. It simply scales the canvas like so, okay? So if I use this, I'm just going scale it to zoom in and out the entire document, and the scroll is just to click and drag to change the x-axis or the y-axis, right? But like I said, I don't use those as much, but as long as you remember they're there, that's good. Let's go ahead and click actual, and that's it. And now let's use the manipulation of the 3D space or the camera. So I'm going to show you how to use these buttons, but also how to use the navigation with the mouse or the mouse cursor and the keyboard, which is ultimately what we're going to end up using. But it's good to know that they refer to the same thing here in case you need to go back and use them. So to rotate the camera around the model, we can just click and drag in this edit object or rotate edit object, and we can move around, okay? Now, this is exactly the same thing as just clicking anywhere outside in the canvas, not over the model, because if you click over the model, it will ultimately edit the model or change it. So click anywhere outside, and that's just gonna rotate everything, right? So the same thing, rotating from this button or clicking and dragging from the canvas. Now the next thing will be to move or pan around. So this move, I'm going to click and drag, and that is panning the camera view around the model. And I'm going to do the same thing by holding the Alt key, and Alt is the first modifier that we're going to talk about. So if we press Alt in your keyboard and click anywhere on the canvas, just click and drag, that is exactly the same thing as moving from this button. Okay, so let me just draw that here. So this one will be Alt plus click and drag, right? Then we also have the rotation. Rotation will be just in the canvas, click and drag. And the final one, which is sometimes the complicated one, but I'll show you both. I'll show you a complicated version and a more streamlined version, just because it is good to know both, and it has to do with the zoom in 3D, okay? So the first one, that is actually the old version or the more traditional one. So this is the one that I use most of the time because I'm used to it. So I'm going to go ahead and hold the Alt key and click on the canvas to start panning. And now I'm going to let go of the Alt key without letting go of the click, okay? And I'm letting go of the Alt, and now I can zoom in and out, all right? That might sound like a mouthful of things that you have to do, but this is how the original navigation of ZBrush was, and I'm kind of used to this one. Of course, this is the most complicated one, but I'm going to show you a simple one. Let me just repeat it just in case, and I'm going to also type it in here so that you can see it. Right? So the way that zooming in ZBrush works, the one or method number one would be to hold the Alt key, click and drag, and then you let go of the Alt key. I'm going to cross it just to indicate you let go of the Alt key, and then click and drag. Hopefully that makes sense. So I'm going to repeat that step by step just to show you the zoom, and repeat all of the other ones that we have already talked about. So the Alt key and click, that's just to pan the camera around. A simple click anywhere in the canvas to rotate, right? And to zoom in and out, I'm going to hold the Alt, click on the canvas, start panning, just to show you that this is exactly the same thing as the moving tool. I'm going to let go of the Alt key without letting go of the click and zooming in and out. All right, so I know this might be a little bit complicated, or if you're not used to this one, you might think, okay, that's it for me. I'm out. I'm not doing any more ZBrush, because it is a very weird way to navigate. But once you get used to, I mean, I'm using this on a daily basis, and I just barely notice the difference. It's very, very simple. Okay, but it does require to get used to it, and that's why I wanted to have this video as a standalone thing just about navigation, so that you're completely comfortable in terms of the navigation. Now, the next thing that we're going to do is I'm going to show you the simple way. So for that, I'm going to show you the next modifier. So let's go ahead and leave the old. I'm going to clear this one out. Okay, and I'm going to leave it here, Alt. So this is modifier 1, and this is the one that we just used. But then we have modifier 2, which is control. So the control key. All right. So with the control key, we can navigate a little bit easier. So the rotation is the same thing. We just click and move around, right? To pan the camera, we hold the Alt key and move it around. But then if we want to zoom in, we can hold the control key and right click on your mouse or your pen, and we can simply zoom in and out. Okay, this one is actually really, really useful because it's the zoom in happens wherever the mouse is. So if I want to zoom in to the ears, I'm going to hold control, right click and drag, and it zooms into the ears. If I want to zoom, let's say, around the tail, control, right click and zoom in into the tail. So this one becomes a really fun and easy way to navigate. Okay, so that's just using the two modifiers, and I'm going to show you or tell you the reason why I like to know both, and depending on my configuration of the workspace, I would use one or the other. Now, the great thing about using this control is the fact that you're using the right click. All right, so the right click is actually pretty good. Let's go ahead and use the control and right click to zoom in really, really, really close to the model. Let's say that you were doing some details here. Okay, so this is an issue that some people that are starting with ZBrush might have encountered. And the fact is that you get to this point and you're doing some details and you try to navigate or rotate things around, and because you're clicking and dragging, you're not actually rotating, you're editing the model. But with the control modifier, we can actually rotate around. Okay, so we can hold the Alt key, right? So going back to the first modifier, and right click, and that allows you to click on the model. It doesn't matter, you don't have to be in an empty area of the canvas. You can hold the Alt and right click to pan, and you can also simply right click without pressing any letter. Right clicking allows you to rotate around. So very, very powerful. I'm going to hold control, right click, and zoom this out and do a quick recap of all that thing that I just showed you. So the first option to rotate around the model is to click anywhere on the canvas again. But if you use the right click, let's put that one here, right? If you want to use the right click, you can actually do that over the model. So I'm going to hover over the face of the dog, right click, and I can rotate from here, right? Or I can just use my normal left click and rotate from the outside. Okay, so whatever you feel more comfortable is totally up to you. Now you use the control as well to zoom in and out. I can also do it from on top of the character. So control, right click, zoom in and out. If you want to use the Alt version, which is more complicated, is holding the Alt key, click on the canvas to start panning, let go of the Alt without letting go of the click, and then zoom in and out. All right. And finally, to pan, you can use the Alt and click anywhere outside the canvas, or use Alt and right click on top of the mesh. So that's essentially how the navigation works. I know it looks a little bit more complicated, but I want to super simplify it for you and give you the navigation system that I think is going to work the best for you. So here it is, right? I just wanted to explain the different navigation system, and here is what I reckon is going to be best for you. So if you hold the Alt key and right click, right, that's to pan. So I'm going to type it in here, Alt plus right click. Okay, so that is panning or moving. So again, Alt key and right click, that's to pan, and you can do that on top of the model. So that's why I reckon it's going to be the easiest way for you to manipulate this. So Alt and click, easy, on right click. Now for the rotation, you can simply use right click. So you can just hold the Alt and right click to pan, and whenever you want to rotate, just simply right click, and that's it. Okay, and to zoom in and out, you can use the Control plus right click. All right, so as you can see, the key here really is in the right click. All right, you can try both. I mean, you can try the first thing that I showed you, or honestly, that's the one that I'm more used to, and I can move around a little bit faster. But for someone starting with ZBrush, I reckon this way is the way to go. It's the simplest way. It's just a right click, and the difference between panning and rotating is simply a modifier key, which is either the Alt key or the Control key, right? So that's all you need. I'm going to do a little drawing here as well. I know this might be a little bit basic for you if you're already familiar with ZBrush, but this is a mouse. So you have the right click and, sorry, that's not the right click, the left click and the right click. And then you have Alt, and then you have Control. Right? That's not an L. All right. So yeah, basically that's all you need to use to navigate ZBrush. So right click to rotate, right? Right click plus Control to zoom. This is not an X. This is a plus, right? And right click plus Alt, right, to pan. Okay, so that's going to be the easiest one, and you only need to use one single click. And if you're using a mouse, a pen, like I'm doing at the moment, a Wacom pen or any other tablet, what I do in this case is and this is just a productivity tip, what I do is I just map to one of these keys or one of these buttons that you have in your mouse. I just map the right click, right? So the click, the actual tip of the pen is going to be the left click, and this one is going to be the right click, right? So once you get familiar with this way of navigating, you will see that in terms of productivity, using a single key to move around is really easy. And something else, like a bonus thing that you can do, since you have the right click mapped to this button in either if it is a mouse or a pen, and I would definitely recommend using a pen, is the fact that you can just right click anywhere and you can access this little pop-up that we talked about in previous videos. So all I'm doing here is panning, zooming in and out, and rotating around the model, all using the right click that I have mapped to my pen. So I think that sort of covers the navigation. Of course, the more that you work with ZBrush, the more you're used to this navigation. And if you have already started working with ZBrush and you found that a different way to navigate is better for you, it's totally acceptable. Like, just go with that, whatever it feels more comfortable. This is just for someone that, struggles a little bit with the navigation. I just want to give you the easiest way of navigating. And these buttons here allow you to just, remember that the navigation is all in there, and you can rely on just the buttons if you wanted to. But that's going to be, a little bit time consuming if you want to just rotate around a specific area just with the buttons. So it's better to do it from the canvas. Okay, so we have covered the navigation. From now on, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of some of these buttons for the next UI, because now we know the shortcut of this and we don't need to use these buttons. So we can just do everything from the canvas with the Alt or the right click and the Control modifiers. Now there's one more thing that I want to show you, which is this lock camera. So if we press on this one, now the camera is going to be locked. Okay, so now it doesn't matter what you do, what modifier you press, you won't be able to rotate around the model. So this one is very useful in certain parts or in certain processes, like if you want to feed the for example, match a reference that you have in the background or something like that, it's good to have the camera set there so that you won't move it accidentally and you can move the actual mesh. So I just wanted to let you know it's there and you can have it in your UI. In the standard UI would appear on the right-hand side, but let's concentrate on this UI for now. I'm going to toggle it off so that I can move around. And finally, we are going to talk about very briefly about the navigation of the 3D object as well as saving cameras. So the navigation of the 3D object is pretty simple. We have three options. We have move, scale, and rotate. And it doesn't matter which one we choose. Whichever option we choose is going to bring us this gizmo by default. Now, in older version of ZBrush, before the gizmo was introduced, ZBrush artists used what is called the transpose line. So this button here at the top, which is the gizmo 3D, this one right here, you'll see that sphere is very similar. If I toggle this off, now what I have is this line. This is a very powerful line, a very powerful tool that I use for a long time. Now, the gizmo is a little bit more streamlined, but this is still a very powerful thing. So if I click and drag, remember now I have the move selected without the gizmo. So I have enabled the move tool and I got rid of the gizmo. So I'm using the transpose line. I can click here on the tail or like this back of the dog, and I can drag this line like so. All right. And the way that this line works, we're not going to get into too much details of this line. I want to click on the center of this dot and you see a red circle appears. And because we're in move, it allows me to move dog from this point. So the pivot really becomes this part in here. Okay. It's going to be the same if I choose scale. So now I can take this and click on this button and I can scale it from that point. So the pivot is really here. And I can rotate it. So I can click rotate and do the same thing. Okay, that is the transpose line. But nowadays, using the gizmo is actually much easier and more streamlined in terms of what people are used to. So let's go ahead and click on the gizmo again to enable it. And this is the Gizmo 3D. The Gizmo 3D has a lot of functionality, and we're gonna get to that pretty soon when we start actually blocking out our character. But for now, I just want you to understand that you have the move, the scale, and the rotate. All of these buttons, all of these switches will do the same thing for the gizmo. So you can bring in the gizmo with any of these three buttons. The only reason we have three different buttons is if we decided to use the transpose line, because one is just for rotate, the other one is just for scale, the other one is just for move. But for the most part, we're going to be using the 3D gizmo. So if we enable it, regardless of which one you choose, all of them are going to be here. So you have, let me just clear this up. So you have these elements here for scaling. Then you have the lines around there to rotate. And then you have the arrows to move. So basically you have all of these three actions in one single element. So that's why I just want to clarify this, that you can choose anything really, move, scale, or rotate, and they're all going to bring the same gizmo. Now we're going to get into much more details about the Gizmo 3D, but for now, I just want to reset the position of the gizmo because, you know, right now it's sort of like rotated in a weird area, and the pivot is at the back of the dog. So the first thing I want to do is click on this location icon, the third icon from the left, and that is going to center the pivot or the Gizmo 3D to the entire volume of the mesh. All right. So what ZBrush does at that point is just evaluate the entire volume. So this is the limit on the left, or the border here. The one on the right will be here, the tail. The one at the bottom will be these legs, and the top in here. So it kind of like creates a virtual volume in here, and then figures out where is the center, and that's when it centers the pivot. Okay. So now that it's centered, I'm also going to reset the rotation. So you have this lock icon here. Again, this is just a quick overview. We're going to get into much more detail, but I'm going to click on this lock, and basically now this is unlocked. So if I click on this rotation icon, ZBrush is going to reset the rotation without affecting the mesh. If I lock it back in, when I rotate, right, I can rotate the model in 3D. Okay, so three different types of kind of like navigation that we have covered. So we covered the actual canvas that we rarely going to be using, just the AAF and the actual. Then we have the camera angle, which is rotation with just the right click around any way that you wanted to, then the Alt and right click to pan, and then the Control and right click to zoom in and out. And then this is actually, the gizmo is actually to rotate the 3D object. So if I want the dog to be standing up, I can just rotate it like that. I can scale it, make it smaller, scale it in one single axis. I can move it around. So I just want you to play around with this manipulator and the Gizmo 3D and the rotation, and just get comfortable with it. Okay, you don't have to worry about anything else at this point. Just make sure that you are comfortable rotating around. In fact, a simple exercise would be to just rotate the dog around and just place it in one of the corners of this gizmo. Sorry, in one of the corners of the grid. And the grid is something that you will see here at the bottom, very faintly. Hopefully you can see some lines in there, and it will come with the project. So because we loaded the project, it will be there for you as well. So just do that, and then if you want to keep practicing, do the same thing, but just rotating it around. Make sure that it is right in the corner. Make it bigger. But anyway, that's just the navigation process. So right now we are basically in gizmo mode, or we're manipulating and rotating this object. But if I want to go back into draw mode, which is essentially being able to sculpt on the model or manipulate the mesh, we can click on this draw, and then we'll go back to eventually using the brushes in ZBrush to sculpt the model. All right, so that covers pretty much everything that it has to do with navigation in ZBrush. Hopefully you can practice this a little bit and get comfortable, because later on we're going to be able to move a lot faster if we have covered these basics and we're comfortable navigating in ZBrush. Now, the last thing that I'm going to do is show you the store camera to wrap up this video. So let's say that I want to work from this angle of the dog. I'm going to go ahead and store a camera. So I'm going to click Store Cam, and this little pop-up appears. So I'm going to type side view, let's call it left, and hit enter. And that basically stores a camera. So now I can move around, and then using these arrows, I can go back and forth between whatever cameras I have saved. So right now I only have one, but let's say I do another one, maybe 3/4 side view from this angle, and just go ahead and click Store Cam. I'm gonna call it 3/4, or like 3/4, and I can now move around, rotate, and maybe actually go closer and do a detail version, or a camera that I can work on details on the head. I want to store a new camera, call it details, for example, and now I can cycle between the different cameras that I saved. Okay, so side view, these 3/4, and the details. So that's basically it. We're going to get into much more details, but this video is all about getting comfortable with the navigation, getting to know the modifiers in the keyboard that we're going to be using. And again, this might be a little bit basic for you if you already know how to navigate in ZBrush, but it's absolutely important to understand this as one of the core elements so that we can work much faster in the following modules. So this first module is about fundamentals, essential concepts, and as long as you're completely and 100% comfortable with all that we talked about in this module, we are ready to move on and start creating some awesome stuff. All right, so we are ready to move on to the next module and start working in ZBrush and creating some awesome stuff. Just before you move into the next module, there is an extra or a bonus lesson for this module where I'm going to show you a rookie mistake, or something that if it happens, you at least know how to avoid it and why it's happening. And it's honestly one of the most frustrating things that you can find if you're new to ZBrush and you're learning. So I'll see you in that lesson, and then we can move on to the next module. All right, so I'll see you there.